All right, get ready, because today we are taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of G.
Yeah.
General cognitive ability.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
For the uninitiated out there,
Okay.
you might be thinking, isn't that just IQ? But trust me,
Right.
there is way more to it than meets the eye, especially when we are thinking about your career and how it can affect your work life.
Hmm.
And, we've got a whole stack of research here, some even from a special issue of the Human Performance Journal,
Wow.
all about how G impacts things.
Well, G has been a hot topic in work psychology for over a century, and for good reason.
Exactly. And we are going to uncover not just what G is,
Yeah.
but also how it can actually predict things like job performance.
Right.
And even things like, get this, traffic accidents.
Really?
Who knew?
Wow, that's interesting.
It really does have a far-reaching impact.
It does. It really does.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Yeah.
What exactly is G, and where did this idea even come from?
Well, G is essentially a measure of your brain's processing power, how efficiently you learn, solve problems, and adapt to new situations.
Okay.
The concept goes back to the early 1900s.
Wow.
Thanks to a researcher named Charles Spearman.
Okay, so this isn't some newfangled idea.
No.
This guy Spearman, he was looking at G way back then.
He was.
Wow.
And here's the really fascinating part. Spearman didn't just study, say, math whizzes. He looked at performance across a huge range of subjects, everything from music to classics, and you know what he found.
What's that?
The people who excelled in one area tended to do well in others.
Oh, interesting.
That's how he landed on this idea of a general cognitive ability kind of underlying it all.
So it's not just about being book smart.
Right.
It's about how your brain tackles all sorts of challenges.
Exactly. Think of it like this. G is like the engine in a car.
Okay.
A powerful engine can handle anything you throw at it. A steep hill, a winding road, you name it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So G isn't just about acing a test. It's reflected in how we handle all sorts of real-life stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Think about learning a new software program at work, or even navigating a new city.
Okay.
The faster you can process information and adapt, the smoother those experiences are going to be.
So how much does this G factor change over time? I mean, we're always learning, we're always growing, right?
That's a great question, and it gets to one of the most important things about G. It's stability.
Okay.
Research shows that your G is remarkably consistent throughout your life.
Is it really?
It really is.
So the G I have now is pretty much what I'll have decades from now. That's both impressive and a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Does that mean we're all kind of stuck with whatever G we've got?
Well, we'll get into whether you can actually improve your G later on.
Okay.
But for now, let's focus on what the stability means for your career, because here's where things get really interesting.
All right, lay it on me.
All right.
How does G actually connect to my job performance?
Well, decades of research has consistently shown that G is one of the best predictors of job success.
Oh, wow.
Period.
Really?
And we're not just talking about white-collar jobs here. It applies across all sorts of fields.
Really? So someone could look at my G and predict how well I do at my job.
They could, yeah.
That's kind of wild.
It is.
Okay.
There are some really amazing studies that back this up.
Right.
One study looked at U.S. Air Force pilots and navigators,
Wow.
and their G scores, measured years before they even started training, could predict how well they'd perform in their roles.
So from landing a plane to,
Yeah.
say, mastering a new sales strategy,
Sure.
G plays a role.
It does, and it's especially crucial as you move up the ladder into more complex roles.
Okay. So what makes a job complex in terms of G?
That's a good question.
I'm picturing something like brain surgery.
Well, brain surgery is definitely up there.
Yeah.
But it's really about how much problem solving, decision-making, and information processing a job requires. Researchers have actually created scales to measure this.
Wow.
And they found that roles requiring higher G tend to be those involving a lot of reasoning and thinking on your feet.
So I'm guessing my job, with all its constant strategizing and problem solving, probably scores pretty high on that complexity scale.
It likely does, yeah.
Okay.
Think about the decisions you make on a daily basis.
Okay.
And how much information you have to sift through to make those decisions.
Right.
That all taps into your G.
All right. So G is important. Got it.
Yeah.
But is it the only Y thing that matters for job success?
No.
I mean, I know plenty of people who aren't necessarily geniuses, but they're incredibly successful because they're, go-getters and have amazing people skills.
You've hit on a really crucial point. G is powerful, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Okay.
It only explains about 25% of the difference in job performance,
Oh,
which leaves a lot of room for other factors,
Okay.
things like personality, motivation,
right.
and something called practical intelligence also come into play.
Okay. Practical intelligence.
Yes.
That sounds intriguing. Is that like street smarts?
It's similar, yeah. It's about knowing how to get things done in the real world.
Okay.
Think of it as the unspoken rules of success, the stuff you learn from experience, not textbooks.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah,
So it's not just what you know, but how you apply it.
exactly.
Oh.
And one component of practical intelligence is something called tacit knowledge.
Okay.
It's the kind of knowledge that's hard to explain or teach directly.
Okay, so give me an example of this tacit knowledge in action.
Let's say you're a new manager.
Okay.
You might have all the textbook knowledge about leadership,
Right.
but there's a lot you can only learn from actually being in the role, like reading your team's dynamics,
Right.
navigating office politics, knowing when to push and when to step back. That's tacit knowledge.
So it's like you can read all the books about riding a bike,
Uh-huh.
but until you actually get on one and fall a few times, you don't really never know how to ride a bike.
That's a perfect analogy. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Studies have shown that when you look at this tacit knowledge, the gap between different groups, like different races or genders,
Right.
tends to be smaller than when you look at traditional intelligence tests.
Now that you mention it, I've definitely seen situations where someone without fancy degrees or top scores totally outperformed others because they just got it in terms of how things really worked.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of recognizing and valuing these different forms of intelligence.
That's right.
But it also leads us to some of the more controversial aspects of G.
Oh. Like what?
Well, some researchers argue that focusing so much on G has actually held back the field, preventing a deeper exploration of other really crucial factors that lead to success.
I can see that. Like maybe we've been so focused on this one measure that we've overlooked other equally important pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And then there's the very sensitive and complex issue of racial differences in G scores. It's a topic that requires a lot of nuance and careful consideration.
So what are some of the key things we need to be aware of when talking about this? All right, so we've established that G is a real thing. It's stable, and it matters, especially in our careers.
Right.
But what's actually going on in our brains when we talk about G? Is there something physically different about people with higher G?
That's a question researchers have been digging into for a while now.
Okay.
And there are some pretty intriguing findings.
Like what?
Well, for example, studies have shown a link between G and brain size,
Okay.
particularly in the frontal cortex, that part of your brain responsible for planning and decision-making.
So bigger brains equal smarter people.
Okay.
Is that the takeaway here? Because I gotta say, that sounds a little too simple.
You're right to be skeptical.
Okay.
It's definitely more nuanced than just size.
Okay.
Think of it this way. A bigger, more powerful engine might have the potential for more horsepower, but it also needs the right systems to make use of that power.
Right.
Same with our brains. It's not just about size, it's also about the efficiency of those neural connections.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So it's like a bigger brain might have more raw potential, but it's how that potential is used that really matters.
Exactly. And researchers are looking at all sorts of ways to kind of understand this efficiency,
Okay.
from studying brainwave patterns to looking at how the brain uses energy.
Energy, like how much coffee we drink to power through those tough problems.
Not quite, though I wouldn't blame you for thinking that.
Okay.
It's more about how efficiently our brains use glucose, which is kind of the primary fuel source for our brain cells.
Okay.
Some studies suggest that people with higher G might actually use less energy to perform those complex tasks.
So it's like they're getting better gas mileage in their brains. That's fascinating.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And it kind of makes you wonder, could we train our brains to be more efficient in that way?
Right, because earlier you mentioned that G is pretty stable throughout life. Does that mean we're stuck with whatever G we're born with? I'm hoping that's not the case.
The good news is, it's not entirely fixed.
Okay, good.
While genetics and early experiences do play a big role,
Right.
there is a growing body of research looking at ways to enhance cognitive function.
Okay, that's a relief. Tell me more about these boosting techniques.
Well, one area of research focuses on cognitive training programs.
Okay.
Think brain training apps, but with more scientific backing.
Okay.
Some studies show these programs can improve working memory, attention, and processing speed.
It's like doing brain push-ups.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. But I've tried some of those brain training apps, and honestly, they felt a little gimmicky.
Yeah,
Are these research-backed programs really different?
they can be, yeah.
Okay.
Not all brain training is created equal.
Okay.
Some programs are definitely more effective than others,
Okay.
and it really depends on what skills you're trying to improve.
Okay, so cognitive training is one option. What else can we do to kind of sharpen our mental game?
Well, remember how we talked about the brain needing glucose for fuel?
Yeah.
This is where things like diet and exercise come into play.
All right, so those healthy habits everyone keeps talking about actually matter for our brains too.
Absolutely. Physical exercise increases blood flow to the brain,
Okay.
which can help boost cognitive function.
Okay.
And a diet rich in antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids can protect your brain cells from damage.
So hitting the gym and eating my veggies can actually make me sharper. Sign me up. But let's be real. Even with the best diet and exercise, sometimes life throws those curveballs that make it tough to stay focused.
Yeah.
What about things like stress? Does that impact our G?
Stress is a big one.
Right.
Chronic stress can actually damage brain cells and impair cognitive function.
Oh, wow.
That's why it's so important to find healthy ways to manage stress,
Huh.
whether it's through mindfulness, exercise, or just spending time in nature.
Okay, so it's not just about doing brain puzzles. It's about taking care of our whole selves. Mind, body, the whole package.
Exactly. And don't forget the importance of sleep.
Right.
When we sleep, our brains are busy consolidating memories and clearing out toxins.
Okay.
Skimping on sleep is like running your brain on fumes.
You know, now that you mention it, I've definitely noticed that when I'm sleep deprived, I'm not exactly firing on all cylinders.
We've all been there.
Yeah,
And that brings us back to this idea of G not being the whole story.
right,
We've talked about personality, motivation, and practical intelligence.
right.
But there's another really important theory to consider, the theory of multiple intelligences.
Okay, remind me about this one.
Sure.
Is this the one where everyone's a genius in their own way?
That's the one. It was developed by Howard Gardner,
Okay,
and it basically challenges this idea of G as the only measure of intelligence.
okay,
Gardner argues that there are actually multiple types of intelligence,
okay.
like linguistic, musical, spatial, interpersonal. The list goes on.
So someone might not score super high on a traditional IQ test, but they could be brilliant musicians or incredible at reading people.
Exactly. And this has huge implications for how we think about success, both in the workplace and in life.
Right.
Maybe instead of trying to fit everyone into the same G-shaped box,
Right.
we need to recognize and value these different forms of intelligence.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know for me, I'm much more creative and people-oriented than I am, say, mathematically inclined.
And that's valuable.
Yeah.
The workplace needs all sorts of talents to thrive. So while G might be a good predictor of performance in certain roles, it's crucial to consider the whole person,
Okay.
their unique strengths, and the context of the job.
I'm starting to think this G thing is kind of like a superpower. You know?
Okay.
It's awesome to have, but it's not the only thing that makes a hero.
Right.
You need the right skills, the right team, and the right motivation to really make a difference.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it leads us to another really important question. How do we ensure that everyone has the opportunity to develop their superpowers, regardless of their G level? That gets us into the realm of social and environmental factors.
Okay, so it's not just about what's going on inside our heads, but also about the world around us.
Exactly. Things like access to quality education, early childhood stimulation,
Okay.
and a supportive and intellectually stimulating environment can have a huge impact on cognitive development.
So creating a society that nurtures intelligence in all its forms is crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone has the chance to reach their full potential,
Right.
regardless of their background or their G score.
This is all incredibly insightful. We've gone from the biological basis of G to its impact on our careers, and now we're talking about the bigger picture of how society can support the development of intelligence in all its forms.
Right.
Is there anything else we should consider as we wrap up this deep dive?
You know, it's amazing to think about how much research has gone into understanding this one concept of G.
It really is.
We've covered brain size, efficiency, even glucose consumption.
But before we wrap up, I'm kind of curious about something.
Okay.
We've talked about how G can predict success, but can you actually do anything to improve your G? Or is it like set in stone?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the answer, like most things related to human intelligence, is a little more complex than a simple yes or no.
Okay, I'm sensing a but coming.
But there's definitely hope.
Okay.
While G is influenced by genetics and those early childhood experiences we talked about,
Right.
there's growing evidence that certain interventions and lifestyle choices can kind of nudge that cognitive needle, so to speak.
Okay, color me intrigued. Tell me more about these G-boosting interventions.
Yeah.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, you've probably heard of brain training apps and games.
Oh, yeah.
Some of those are actually based on solid research into what's called cognitive training.
So like hitting the mental gym.
Exactly.
But do those brain games actually work?
Yeah.
I've tried a few, and honestly, I mostly just got better at the games themselves. Not necessarily like smarter overall.
That's a pretty common experience.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the importance of choosing the right programs.
Okay.
Not all brain training is created equal. Some programs are specifically designed to target skills like working memory, attention, and processing speed.
Right.
And those have shown some pretty promising results in research studies.
So it's about finding programs that are backed by science, not just marketing hype.
Exactly.
Okay.
And even then, the results can vary depending on the person in the program.
Right.
It's not a magic bullet.
Okay, so cognitive training is one avenue.
Right.
What else can we do to give our brains a boost?
Well, remember when we talked about the brain using glucose for energy?
Yeah.
This is where those healthy lifestyle choices come in.
All right, so eating my veggies and hitting the gym will make me sharper. I'm all for that.
They can.
Okay.
But let's be real. Even with the best intentions,
Yeah.
life can get in the way.
That's true.
What about things like stress? Does that have an impact on our G?
Stress is a huge factor, I imagine.
It is, yeah. Chronic stress can actually damage brain cells and impair cognitive function.
Really?
It can.
Wow.
So finding healthy ways to manage stress,
Right.
whether it's through mindfulness, exercise, or simply taking breaks,
Yeah.
can really protect your brain in the long run.
It's amazing to think that something as simple as, taking a walk in nature could actually be helping my brain function better.
It really can make a difference.
Wow.
And let's not forget the importance of sleep.
Right, of course, yeah.
When you sleep, your brain is busy consolidating memories, clearing out toxins.
Right.
Skimping on sleep is like running your brain on fumes.
I've definitely noticed that when I'm sleep deprived, I'm not exactly at my sharpest.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Coffee can only do so much.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this idea that G, while important, isn't the whole story. Remember those multiple intelligences we talked about?
I do, yeah.
Maybe instead of trying to boost our G to fit into a specific mold, we should really be focusing on developing our unique strengths,
Okay.
whatever those might be.
It's like instead of trying to be a jack of all trades, maybe it's better to be a master of one.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
The world needs all sorts of talents to thrive.
Right.
So while G might be a good predictor of performance in certain roles,
Right.
it's really crucial to consider the whole person,
Okay.
their unique strengths, and the specific demands of the job.
And that's where things like personality, motivation, and that practical intelligence we talked about really come into play.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the power of lifelong learning.
Oh, of course.
Our brains are incredibly adaptable, and they can continue to grow and change throughout our lives.
So it's never too late to learn a new skill, pick up a new hobby, or challenge ourselves intellectually.
Never.
Okay.
And those experiences, those challenges, can actually help to build what's called cognitive reserve, which makes our brains more resilient as we age.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like building a mental fortress against the wear and tear of life.
Exactly. And remember, intelligence isn't just about acing tests or having a high G score. It's about how we use our minds to navigate the world, solve problems, connect with others, and create something meaningful.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
Good.
We've explored G from all angles.
I have.
The biology, the research, the controversies, and the practical implications.
Yeah.
But more than that, I think it sparked a real sense of curiosity about the just incredible potential of the human mind.
And that's what we hope for.
Yeah.
This deep dive has hopefully given you a more complete picture of what G is,
Right.
how it affects your life, and why it's so crucial to approach this topic with nuance and a sense of wonder.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up,
Okay.
I want to leave you with this thought.
Yeah.
If G is largely about processing information and adapting to new challenges,
Right.
what are you doing to flex those mental muscles and build your cognitive strength? It's something to think about as you continue on your own learning journey.